We're kicking off the second half of the season, I guess you could say, after our spring break. Who was here on Saturday, March 5th? Was anybody here? Yeah, what did you think of that? After the meeting, we had right around 200 individuals here in this entire place was filled up. And it was actually spectacular. Shane spoke for about 4 hours straight, non-stop, and it was just absolutely spectacular. There were lots of fun little scenarios that we did, and hopefully we got your heart rate going a little bit, especially at the beginning there, and we hope you walked away with some good information. Now, Cynthia Ladd is here again. She's here in the back at the table. So if anyone was at that meeting on Saturday and did not get a chance to sign up for U.S. Law Shield, and it's something that you were thinking about, she's obviously here to answer any questions that you have tonight. And probably almost every night somebody will be here from U.S. Law Shield, and we really appreciate that. Thank you, Cynthia. And it was Paul? Paul. And Paul. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Great. Just for those that have not been here before, can you raise your hands for me? Is there anybody here? Great. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here with us. And just so you're aware of where everything is, the restrooms are here in the back. And then there's also a drinking fountain here in the back that I believe that's filtered water. You getting feedback? Is that pretty bad?
Yeah, it's echoing.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. If you turn the volume up too much, it gives too much squelch.
Is that any better? Yeah. So we'll just keep it like that. Can you hear me? Okay. Great. So water, and there's also desserts back here on the table, free desserts, donuts, I believe, from a local establishment called Dutch Donuts, and they actually give us a nice little discount for these, and they also give us a dozen free donuts when we go back to purchase again from them. So if you are able to frequent the establishment, where are they at, Nicole?
Right here. They're on Arizona. Where am I at? Arizona and Ocotillo.
Arizona and Ocotillo in Cameron. So we thank them for helping us out. So other housekeeping items, obviously, if we need to get out of the room quickly, there's 2 doors here. There's a door there in the back if you need to exit. And also those that have not been here before, if you would like to receive our continual weekly emails that basically remind you of the meetings every week. We do meet every week. You can sign up on the email list over here on the table, or you can go to our website, hit subscribe, and you can sign up yourself on our website automatically. Great, so why don't we go ahead and start. So as you know, we start each week with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. So we're going to start first with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'll ask somebody to give a prayer. If there's somebody here that would like to volunteer to give a prayer, think about it, and when we're done with the pledge, you can raise your hand, and we'll invite you up to offer a prayer for us. So our professional Pledge of Allegiance leader, Catalina Crane, will come up with her younger brother, Eldon. So come on up, guys. And so if everybody can stand, the flag's here on the wall.
Less.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Catalina Eldon. Great. So, does anybody want to offer a prayer for us? No? Very good.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we gather tonight as friends of Patriots to discuss freedom and learn some things that will help increase our knowledge and our ability to defend our rights, defend our country, and the freedoms that we love. We're
some exciting things are going on here, so I want to go through everything in the order fashion. But once again, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a few vendors here with us tonight. We have Krauser, we have some great books, materials, works, other really fun swag over on this table. If you're interested in that, you can stop by. A couple of the books that we have there kind of correlate with what we did on Saturday, March 5th. After you shoot and you're first done, these are great books written by a local author named Alan Coleman, who will actually be coming to speak with us. I think it's May 24th, I believe. He's a great man. He's done a lot of good for the Second Amendment movement, and his books are over here on the table. They are, what were they, Shane? 10, 15? 15. Great. So these books are 15. And then U.S. Law Shield was kind enough to print some shirts up for us. We've got our co-branding with our name on the side, on the sleeve, on the left sleeve, and then we've got U.S. Law Shield on the right sleeve. Kind of fun. If you're interested in these, they're $10 a piece. We've got about 16 or so left. One small, so if you want a small, you got to run over there. But there's quite a few mediums, some larges, 2X's and 3X's. So they are over here at the table with my daughter's Let's Go Brandon, Let's Go Bracelets business. So she started that with Let's Go Brandon craze, and she's having a blast doing that. So she's over there. And Aaron Gould also has a table here in the back. And what Aaron came up and spoke a few weeks ago about what he's trying to do is trying to help us get off the mainstream technology platforms, if that's something that you're interested in doing. Beating up Google, beating up Microsoft, and then shifting into an open source type of framework. And he's offering his services to us, and he's here in the back of the red shirt, so if you'd like to stop by and speak with him, he would be happy to chat with you. Thanks, Aaron, for being here. And those of you that have not been here with us in the past, I just want to just really briefly kind of let you know how this all started. This started out in late 2020, just before the 2020 election. And my friend Joe and I, we got together and had a handful of guys that we met at his house and just kind of started talking about what if something happens after the election that we don't want to have happen. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Who are we going to call for help? We just wanted to get ready in case something happened. And that kind of grew. Guys kept coming, and eventually Shane Krauser moved into the neighborhood where we live, and he saw what they were doing. And I said, hey, you guys are really doing something special here. Why don't we inject some other things into it? Maybe we can take this statewide and see where it goes from there. So we created basically a platform of education where we teach constitutional education with the goal to create constitutional advocates, one patriot at a time. And by doing that, it gives you the confidence to actually speak up and to argue the points of freedom and liberty when it's most needed. And that's our goal here, is to teach you, to train you so that you have that confidence when you go out and you have to defend our liberties and freedoms, that you can do that with confidence. And that's the goal of this organization. And that's what we hope to do. And we hope to take this all over the state and maybe someday across the nation. And that's our goal. So we welcome you, glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy yourselves tonight. And we're self-funded. We don't charge for our meetings, but we do have a little donation jar that we pass around each week. And you guys are absolutely amazing. We have been able to pay for every night in cash. We pay $250 to rent this facility every meeting. And from your donations, we're able to do that. And that money does not go to me and Shane or Joe. Your donations go specifically towards the facilities and whatever it takes to put on these meetings. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. It's tough right now with the inflation that we're dealing with, and the fact that there is no 3-second rule anymore, right? It's now the 10-second rule.
There's no rule.
There is no rules anymore. No. Thanks to the Biden inflation, if it lands on the floor, you pick it up after an hour. Just go with it, right? So that's the joke in our house. But okay, so before we turn the time over to Shane, we also have a special guest here tonight named John Willis. And John is a early advisor to the Trump organization for Truth Social, which is Trump's, his company's social media platform that's just rolled out. Is anybody on Truth Social yet? Great. Good. I just got in finally. We got United Patriots on there. We have United Patriots as our name. And there are a lot of people that wanted that name. So luckily we got that early on. So United Patriots is on True Social now. If you're on there, follow us, and that's going to be our home base eventually. Telegram's been good, but as Truth Social starts adding more functionality and video capabilities, that will be our home base going forward. Because we know we will not be de-platformed on that platform. So we're very excited about that. Okay, so fun part of the night. About John. I didn't finish talking about John Willis, but John is also the co-founder and CEO of a social media company called Freespace Social. And he's going to be speaking with us tonight about social media censorship after Shane gives his presentation. So we're very excited to have him with us tonight, and we think you'll really enjoy what he has to say. All right, who's ready for to answer some fun questions and get some gift certificates here, right? So who brought more than one person here tonight? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Who brought two? Two people. Okay, great. Who brought three? Three people. Oh, shoot. Okay. Who brought four? Oh,
it's a 3-way tie.
Great. So we actually have a winner. You don't have a tie tonight. Yes. Oh, wait, I thought you brought four. No, I didn't. Oh. Okay. Great. So you get to pick a $25 gift certificate, so come on up here if you'd like to go right now. All right, so let's move to our trivia. So who's ready for some trivia? So if you would like to have a shirt instead of a gift card or whatever, you can pick a shirt. Just let us know. But whoever wins the trivia contest gets to come up and pick one of the $25 gift certificates as well. Okay? So here we go. Aaron, I need you to come up here and help me score this.
Okay.
You did such a fabulous job last week. 2 weeks ago. Okay, here we go. Question number 1. And you just shout it out, and he will be the judge on who got it first, okay? Question number 1. The first group of amendments to the Constitution are called what? Number 2. How many amendments make up the Bill of Rights? Good. How many amendments currently exist? Number 4, which amendment deals with self-incrimination, double jeopardy, and hearing? What was the answer? 5th, right. Which amendment deals with freedom of religion, press, speech?
Over here, lady in the nice shirt.
Which amendment deals with unreasonable search and seizure? You guys are fired. Great. Number 7. Which amendment removed U.S. Senate appointments from state legislatures modifying the original intent of Article 1, Section 3? I just wanted to say it. Number 8. Which amendment deals with the right to bear arms?
51. Amendment 51.
Red line.
Let me show you the crowd here.
Well, that's fun. Good job, guys. Jeez.
Right.
That's for sure. So the tiebreaker questions, I'll just read them off just for fun, because it's good to know. So if we were tied like we usually are, this would have been the question. Number 1, Article 1 is what? Referring to what? Legislative. Article 2, executive, and Article 3, which is L-E-J, leg, right? That's their acronym. Okay? Very good. Very good. All right, we're getting really good at this. Very excited. All right, so we're going to turn the time over to Shane Krauser here, and just be aware that at some point tonight we'll see a little floating bucket that comes around with some donations on it, and if you feel like we've added value to your life in some way, you can make a decision on what you'd like to donate tonight, okay? So who has Ben had the opportunity to listen to Shane Krauser in the past? Just about all of us, right? Well, for those few of you that haven't yet, let me just read a little bit about Shane. Shane is arguably the most dynamic speaker and educator on liberty and freedom. He has been called by many the best instructor of the Constitution in the country. A few details about Shane. He was a trial attorney for 14 years. He taught constitutional law for over 15 years at 3 different Arizona colleges. He taught at Phoenix and Glendale Police Academy for more than 10 years. He was a radio talk show host for 3 years. He toured and shared the state with Glenn Beck for 18 months. He testified in front of Congress, the U.S. Congress, and has over 2,000 speaking engagements on liberty around the world, including Mexico, Peru, and Canada. So let's welcome Shane Krauser.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, welcome. Are you guys excited to be here tonight? Yeah. I'm excited to be here as well. I know we got some. George, you're waving at me.
No, the lights are behind you.
Yeah, I want to extend a special welcome, especially to those that are new. Y'all are from, is it Idaho or are you from Idaho? Idaho, Wisconsin, and what? Washington. Like, listen, I thought we were going to be friends because I saw this Pac-12 USC shirt. I'm not so sure that that's a lot from. So those are fighting words, right? Those are fighting words. Awesome. Well, yeah, we're excited to have you back. What the folks that invited you?
Sue and Ron.
And where did you meet them?
We might have a parking lot.
This is a revolution, guys. This is the revolution going on. Getting people in the parking lots, like covert operations going on, and off the Liberty Gathering on Wednesday night. Well, listen, for those of you that are brand new, I want to announce, well, for everybody really, I want to announce this, but then also get into some details for the new folks. Really help you understand what's going on. For those of you that know people in Utah and Idaho, I'm actually going to be, I'm going on a week-long tour the second week of April. So if you know people in Provo, Orem, Salt Lake, Ogden, and ultimately up in Boise, I'm going to be speaking all up and down there for about 6 days. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great time. With that said, what is it that we're doing here? As Jeff said, this is all about education. Because we believe education is the solution. Thomas Jefferson said it. He's one of my main men. Actually, my favorite founding father was James Madison. James Madison was my favorite. His nickname was Jemmy. I liked him so much that I named my dog after him. Jemmy, J-E-M-M-Y. But Thomas Jefferson said, educate the people and tyranny will vanish like evil spirits to break it up. So that is our big focus. Of course, we have other speakers that come in, individuals running for office, individuals that are involved in a number of things that they're bringing solutions to the table. But we believe this is home base. It's bringing people back here every Wednesday night to discuss some principles. And once a month, I'll have the entire time where we'll really dive into some topics in some detail. But as I like tonight, we've got John that's going to be speaking. So my goal is just to give you a bit of a nugget to walk away with. To have something that you armed yourself with, something that made you understand a little bit better leaving than when you walked in. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So, the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you understand how educated you are on this. I mean, listen, like you, I've been to lots of different gatherings where there's an attempt to talk about freedom. There's an attempt to talk about Constitution. And I listen to them rattle off these questions. And listen, a lot of it's just basic stuff. But the fact that you understand the parameters is a big, big deal. You understand the parameters of the Constitution, the way that it's set up, where various amendments are found. Those are important things. And it's phenomenal. So, with that said, we're going to move into a specific topic. We're going to actually talk a little bit about the First Amendment here tonight. Given that social media is what John's going to be hitting on, I'm going to hit it from a couple different angles on the First Amendment. By the way, how many protections are outlined in the First Amendment? Anybody know that one? Everybody's just applauding you how awesome you are. 8
or 10. Can we guess?
How many?
8 or 10. 4.
4, no. 6, no. 5. Who said 7? Hey, the answer is 5. But I got to tell you, when I was teaching college back in the day, on the first day of class, I just wanted to get a general idea of where my students were. And I would ask them how many amendments are in the Constitution. It wasn't uncommon for them to say 600 or 700. 600 or 700. Unbelievable. I actually had a student actually wrote a paper, right? They had a term assignment to write about a specific topic involving the Constitution. Now, the first sentence of this particular paper: too many people take the USS Constitution for granted. I have to remind the student, listen, this is a document, not a vote. All right? So, but listen, so we've got 7 articles in the Constitution, we've got 27 amendments. What is the purpose of this document? What's the purpose? Protection of the people. How does the document go about protecting the people?
Reigning in the government.
Reigning in the government. Is the purpose of the Constitution to reign in the people?
No.
No, it's not to restrain the people. It's designed to restrain government as they go about the obligation of doing what? Protecting the life, liberty, and property of the people. That's their job. That is their job. And so oftentimes, when we talk about liberty, sometimes we can get caught in these debates going on social media, or just generally in society, about, well, okay, so you think you have that freedom? Tell me where in the Constitution you have that freedom. But of course, we all know that just because the freedom is not listed in the Constitution does not mean that it does not exist.
Ninth
But
Amendment.
the founders never had in mind to itemize all of our liberties for purposes of reminding me and you that those liberties exist. The only reason behind enumerating certain liberties in the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights, is to remind who? The government. Hey, when you go about doing the things that you are permitted to do, that we the people have authorized you to do through Article 1 of the Legislative Branch, Article 2 Executive Branch, Article 3 Judicial Branch, don't tread on these particular liberties. Now, providing a little bit of background here, the Bill of Rights was not an original part of the Constitution, correct? Right? So you have the Constitution ratified in what year? So it was adopted in 1787, but sent out to the states for ratification and was ratified in 1788. There's no Bill of Rights at that point in time. The Bill of Rights would be adopted in 1789, but not ratified until 1791. Now, there are a couple different factions that exist during this time. There's the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. In fact, many of you have probably heard of the Federalist Papers. You've heard of, and many have not heard of the Anti-Federalist Papers. They're what, right? So, Anti-Federalists, what was their stand on government?
They were actually Federalists.
What's that?
They were actually the Federalists.
So talk about that.
Well, Madison and Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, who had a monopoly on the mercantile system in New York, promoted first. They got the term out as they were Federalists because they wanted everybody to think that this new system was separating powers. And so anybody who didn't agree with them, they called them anti-federalists. And the opposite of an anti-federalist is a nationalist.
Yeah.
And we just fought a war over a nationalist ideology. Yeah. So it doesn't matter who's right. It matters who brings up the terms first.
Yeah. That is a great point. That is a really great point. In terms of philosophy, right, when you read the Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalists, for anti-federalists, they were the bigger, was it kind of a bigger government or a smaller government?
They wanted smaller government.
The smaller government. Whereas the Federalists were more a bigger government. Now, don't confuse the Federalist bigger government of 1780 to the bigger government in 2022. All right? And unless, of course, you're Alexander Hamilton or John Adams, they tended to be bigger government folks. I mean, you can see some of those things play out with them. But it was the Federalists that, how do they feel about the Bill of Rights?
No. Don't need it.
It was unnecessary.
Don't need it.
Right.
That's
So
what
the
James
Anti-Federalists
Madison
said, we're not signing up to this document until we have a Bill of Rights. Now again, when you look at the Bill of Rights, which is how many amendments? It's the first amendment. It's got just a few of those of our liberties outlined. Right? Just a handful. Right? Speech and assembly and free exercise of religion and petitioning the government for redress and the right to bear arms and implicit the Fourth Amendment is the right to be left alone. So you have a lot of that going on. So it's just a handful. But they were concerned that if you don't enumerate some of those liberties, that government at some point will infringe upon them. Yes. Oh, how's that? Yes. All right, how's it going? All right. Whereas the Federalists, their thought was, wait a second, if we start enumerating all of these things, are we going to outline all of them? Are we going to put all of our liberties there? Like we're going to write volumes and volumes and volumes? Or is that what we're going to do? And so there's this sort of debate that's going back and forth in this regard, and we end up with the Bill of Rights, which is kind of interesting, some of the things that are listed there, because oftentimes we talk about speech, and we talk about assembly, and we talk about the right to bear arms, but sometimes what we don't talk about are things that you find in the Fifth Amendment that actually expand the government power. Who knows what I'm talking about? Eminent domain. Guys, this is such a mystery to me. That here we got this document, and the Federalists say, hey, we got the 7 articles. We don't need to put in freedom of speech because they go about doing what they're permitted to do. They're not authorized to infringe on speech. Of course, the Anti-Federalists see it differently. But isn't it fascinating that you have an Anti-Federalist who, a little bit for smaller government, they're like, we want this Bill of Rights, and squeezed into this Fifth Amendment is this idea of expansion of government power. You know what I'm talking about when it comes to eminent domain. It's the ability of the government to come in, and if they satisfy a certain burden, they can take your property, right? Reasonable compensation. I find that so crazy that the founders did this in the midst of all of it. It really is. It's kind of bothersome. I mean, I know Thomas Jefferson, he could be throwing fits, throwing elbows. But let's talk about the freedom of speech. What does the First Amendment say about the freedom of speech? What does it say? By the way, hold on. Did you have a comment? You could raise your hand.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the ones that did not want the rights enumerated felt that if we did, like we're saying, if we did enumerate them all, that the ones that weren't enumerated would be ignored.
Yeah, guys, this is really important because I think oftentimes when we think of, well, why couldn't we just enumerate all the rights? Well, our inalienable rights, like, they're infinite. I mean, think about the things that you're doing right at this moment. You're doing a number of things right at this moment that revolve around inalienable liberties. Right? The ability to decide where you're going to sit, decide whether you're going to sit back, cross your arms, close your eyes. Those are inalienable liberties.
Thank God for the 9th Amendment.
Yeah, that's right. And that was key because we didn't list them all. In fact, it was the Federalists that said, hey, what are you going to do? I have a fundamental right to lay on my right side, I have a fundamental right to lay on my left side, and I have a fundamental right to lay on my back. Are you going to list those in the Bill of Rights? Like there's this sarcasm that was going on. But I love that bringing up the 9th Amendment because the 9th Amendment says just because a liberty is not outlined in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There are all kinds of liberties that do exist that are not found in the Bill of Rights. But again, don't get headache on this thing. Because those liberties are only outlined for purposes of restraining government as they go about doing the things they're permitted to do. Ron was a little there.
But looking back, isn't it scary that if they didn't list them, I mean, we're fighting for Second Amendment rights because it's listed.
Yeah.
If it wasn't listed, I'm afraid someone would have said, oh, you don't get that.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Can you imagine if we didn't have the Second Amendment? And I think we'd be dealing with a much different situation today. Much different. So, right. Yeah. Life, liberty. Yeah. What? And your name is? Yeah. So I really appreciate this point because what he's talking about is the Declaration of Independence, which is the foundation, right? You can't understand the Constitution unless you read it through the lens of the Declaration. And he was referring to endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those being life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. The implication is that there are many, many others that exist, but from a broad perspective, man, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness really embraces a lot. So here's what I want to do.
I want to say thank you for proving my ignorance.
Dude, we're buddies. Yeah, I should have done. Was it high school? 5 years ago. Kevin, what I should have done is, so where is that found in the Constitution? So listen, what does the First Amendment say
shall not be abridged.
And who is it telling it can't infringe?
Federal, we the
Well,
people.
it doesn't use for government. I know what you're getting at, like you're crossing. But what does it say specifically? No, it doesn't say. It's close, right? I'm just asking. Yeah, it says Congress. Now, isn't it interesting? It doesn't say the executive branch, and it doesn't say the judicial branch. Why?
Because Congress is the one that makes the law.
Congress is the one that makes the laws, right? So, yeah, the implication is that, yeah, it's only the legislature that's vested with the power to make laws. So it says Congress shall make no law infringing or abridging the freedom of speech. Okay? Now I want to throw out an actual case because we're going to have a little bit of a debate over the next couple minutes. I've got a couple different scenarios I'd love to debate with you, but I want to show you how this works in real life. What is it that goes on in courtrooms? What is it that when we see issues of speech potentially being infringed upon, what is it that we're doing?
A wire on your left arm. Your left arm.
Your
left arm.
Are you my ward?
You're going to pull it out.
Is that bothering you?
You're going to pull it out. You're going to hang yourself. You don't want you to get hurt.
All right. So here's an actual case, and you all are familiar with it. It was Texas v. Johnson in the 1980s. Individual shows up to the Republican National Convention in Texas and does what? Burns the flag. He burns the American flag, and he's arrested and charged under the statute in Texas that says you cannot burn a venerated object. Now, it defines venerated as a number of things, but one of those things that fits within that category of venerated is the American flag. So he is arrested, he's charged, and he's convicted. So now, just so you how you see how this plays out, is after his conviction, he's appealing. Of course, he makes the argument at the trial level. He's asking for the case to be dismissed because he's suggesting that the law is null and void because it violates the First Amendment. Right? The trial judge says, I'm discounting that, allows it to go to trial, he's convicted, and then is appealed up to the appellate court, and then goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court has to make a decision as to whether or not this law that forbids an individual from burning a venerated object or destroying a venerated object is in violation of the First Amendment. And if it's in violation of the First Amendment, we're going to disregard it. We're going to declare it null and void. So you're sitting as a Supreme Court justice. How do you come down on this case? There's really two choices here. One choice is the law is, in fact, null and void. He was expressing himself. He was communicating a message. That is free speech. We want to protect that. The other side is, well, wait a second. In this particular case, it goes too far. The founders never could have possibly intended to actually allow speech to go this far. And again, he's not even saying anything. He's burning an object. And this is something worthy of protecting. How would you come down on this?
Well, it's all speech is expression, but not all expression is speech. And so certain kinds of expressions that people want to make are just not speech. I don't care.
So what the
activities that a person does
give me an example of something that's an expression that's not speech, or that would not be protected in the First Amendment.
Well, they have said that campaign contributions are now free speech, and so you give money to a candidate. Is that really free speech?
Wow, what do you think? Where do you stand on it?
I don't. Well, we go back to the Constitution that says you can't give endowments or emoluments to people. Well, now emoluments are free speech. So where do you draw the line?
Okay. So let's go back to the original question of the flag order. Is that protected speech here? Are you going to allow the conviction to stand, or are you going to reverse the conviction as this law is in violation of the First Amendment? Where would you go? You would have upheld the conviction.
Yeah.
So you say this is not protected speech.
It's not speech.
Why?
It's an act of, I believe an act of arson or destroying somebody's
Vandalism?
Is not speech.
Okay, fair enough. Now, let me just, one particular fact, I'm wondering if this will change your mind. I mean, I'm not trying to change your mind, but we're debating this. If the flag in fact belonged to him, does that change your perspective? It belonged to him, he shows it around and burns the flag. Is it now protected? Or are you saying it's still not protected speech?
That's a gray area.
What? You're not allowed to do that.
Showing his own property if he wants to.
Okay? But he's burning the flag. He's saying, I'm communicating a message. If you were sitting on the Supreme Court and you were interpreting the law, would you uphold the conviction or reverse?
I would uphold it.
Okay. Why? Why is this not speech?
Because the nation reveres the flag as a symbol of freedom, not to be
Desecrated.
It's a sacred.
So let me ask you this question. And I'm not trying to, I appreciate you doing this, just kind of walking through what you're thinking about. So your belief is you would uphold the conviction, right? It's not protected speech. Do you believe it's speech?
Say again?
Do you believe that that is speech? Burning the flag is speech?
No.
Oh, so you don't even believe that this within the category of speech?
That's correct.
Well, it could.
Okay. All right. All right. I've had enough of you. I'm going to go to Steve.
Accept the flag, accept something of that nature.
How about burning the...
So you're saying, hey, listen, if you want to burn stuff, you can burn stuff, but you're not going to burn the American flag. This is something that you've gone too far when it comes to speech. Okay, let's go to Steve and Ken and then we'll go back.
Okay, so if we take the eagle, which is our American symbol, I can't kill an eagle because it's an American symbol. Would that be the same?
Well, it's an animal. Steve, it's an animal.
But it's the American animal.
So, Steve, let me ask you this. Now, this is going to turn into a riot. Goodness. So, Steve, let me ask you this. Do you believe that burning the flag in this context is speech?
Yeah, it's an expression.
Would you protect it? Would you reverse the conviction?
I wouldn't.
You would uphold the conviction?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's an article that I thought it was protected by law that you can't desecrate.
Well, listen, it may be protected by law, but that's not what we're asking. We're asking whether or not the law should be upheld in the context of a First Amendment that says you can't create a law that abridges the freedom of speech. Because here's the question. Did the state legislature create a law that abridges speech? And if they did create a law that abridges speech, that means the law is null and void. Right? So don't get caught in this. I mean, it happens so often. And Steve, I'm using you as a little bit of an example here, but I really appreciate your insight. Oftentimes what happens, and I saw this happen in the college classroom all the time, and it was this. Well, it's legal. Therefore, that's the end of the discussion. No. We're deciding whether or not the law should actually be the law. Right? That's the discussion. Right? Just because the Supreme Court says something doesn't mean that's the end of the story. Right? And so just because the state legislature says something doesn't mean that's the end of the debate. Right? We're having a discussion. So let's go to Kim.
So I would agree that it's not necessarily speech. Louder. Sorry. I said I would agree that it's not necessarily speech, but I don't think it matters because again, you have the case that we're not enumerating all the rights specifically. And certainly I think you have a right to your expression. And the fact that it would irritate the heck out of everybody in this room probably is not the point. The point is whether or not you're going to allow a government to make decisions about what you can do.
Which government?
And, well,
in this case, it's the state government.
Well, a state government which is regulated by the federal government.
No.
So.
He went somewhere else. The state makes.
So, again, I appreciate the argument you're making. You're saying, you know what? It may not fit within the scope of speech, but could I find maybe another liberty that's being exercised here that you may not like that this fits within? I think that's reasonable. Let's go to Robbie and then we'll come back.
Okay, the biggest problem here is you got to understand all 10 amendments are not solely squared to government. It's solely squared to the federal government. So the Congress cannot make a law infringing on your right for free speech. That does not mean the national government or state governments cannot make laws to infringe your speech. This is why we have a federal system, not a national one. So if a state charges you under a state law, you can't go run to the federal government because the federal government can't use that because the First Amendment doesn't apply to this application because it's only for the Congress cannot make no law. It's not a state issue.
So, Robbie, let me address this real quick. Because the 14th Amendment, when it came into play, one of the objectives was called Doctrine of Incorporation, which was to incorporate the first 10 amendments, and specifically really the first 9 amendments, and make them applicable to the states. That was the idea. One of the ideas behind the 14th Amendment was to go through this Doctrine of Incorporation to ensure that it wasn't just the federal government that was bound by the First Amendment, but that states that were being bound. Now we can take on that discussion for another day, but what I want to do is really focus on, I just want to debate whether or not this is expression of speech or not. Like, that's the question, the goal.
So you have to, if the state says that the American flag is a symbol that you cannot burn, then what's the next thing that they're going to say is federated?
Yeah.
Right? So
So it's a slippery slope.
Everything, and once you start to give government the power to make decisions on what you can and can't do, then you lost the battle already.
Yeah. So you would say this is speech and we're going to protect it. You would overturn the law. And you declare the law null and void and overturn the convention. Correct?
100% agree. I fought for the Federation flag being something special. In fact, it was quite some time ago, there was a bunch of internet challenges going around, right? And I put in there, connecting up on Facebook, or this is kind of fun. I said, hey, if you want to burn a flag, go to the airport, rip one off, and just tell them to burn it. Right? Your life expectancy would be about 6 seconds. You know? And so, although it makes my blood boil, I don't believe the government can tell me what to do. Right? And I'm 90% sure most of you agree the same what it is.
Yeah. So this is speech. This is speech.
Yeah.
Linda.
Thanks to you, I have learned that we the people have the power. The power lays with us first. Then it goes to the states, and then it goes to the federal government, what the states give the federal government. And we have for so long believed what we've been told by Washington, that we've all suckered in and given up our right to be we the people. It's real simple. The Lord didn't give us anything wrong.
So Linda, are you upholding this as speech? Is this free speech, burning the flag?
That is a tough one for me.
Okay. You got to think about it, and I'm going to have you write it. You're going to have to write a 10-page essay. Hey, Mike!
This might be a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it's more provoked thought. At what point does that actually become vandalism? If I want to express myself by destroying something, whatever it is, okay? Obviously I should own it, we already know that, but at what point is that vandalism?
Well, vandalism
I
is...
still want to express myself and have it articulate. I just want to
Well, I mean, I think that's fairly easy, Mike, because vandalism would be the destruction of someone else's property.
Someone else's
Right?
property, okay.
So in this context, it's his property, he's burning the flag, and
If it's his property,
Yeah.
then he should be let go because he is expressing himself using his own property.
What is the expressing, by the way? If you were defending his last name was Johnson, what was Johnson expressing?
If my words
Lack of sensibility.
the actions speak louder than words. You put a visual expression of your vocal, how should I say, frustrations. People are going to see. Sometimes they just don't want to hear it, but if they see what's going on, that's going to light something inside them to do something. If I'm angry enough and nobody's listening, I'm going to start pounding and making noise, and then I'm going to start throwing stuff around just to get you to see what's going on.
So from your perspective,
it's a visual
Mike,
representation of my verbal anger, if you want to put it.
so from your perspective, this was a very powerful way to get the attention of the
It woke a
masses.
whole lot of people up, didn't it?
Better than the megaphone
If they weren't listening to the megaphone and him finally taking that action, then he had every right to do that, because at that point, it was obviously falling on deaf ears, but a whole lot of people saw it. It riled up a whole lot of feathers, and apparently he got his point across. I want to hear the end of the story, but he made enough of a point, but now we're hearing about it now, still, this day and age.
Right. Eric?
I just had a question. Was this entire case predicated on the fact it was a flag and not something else?
Flag. Yep. Yep. Yes. Guarding a venerated object, which was misdemeanor.
Under state law.
Under state law.
And what was his message? Was that did he ever say what his message was?
Well, it was, he showed up at the Republican National Convention. He's expressing his discontent with positions that the Republican Party has taken. Guys, I think this is so important. So I've got to get down here in a few minutes here. I would love to get more perspective on this. But he's expressing his discontent. But let's say that his message didn't make sense. Let's say that I threw out something that I believe Johnson was communicating, and everybody here said that's nonsensical. Do you want to put government in the position to decide whether or not the message is valid or not? No. I'm not interested in that. It might be a ludicrous message. It might be something that the majority disagree with. I happen to believe that, ultimately what the court did in Texas v. Johnson is they overturned the conviction and declared the law null and void. They upheld the speech, and I actually agree with that decision. Listen, you don't stop people from speaking because a message might be offensive.
Right.
Right? And if we're going to go down that road, good luck. We're going to go back to a democracy where the majority get to decide whether or not it's a valid message or not. And so that can't be the barometers, whether or not it is offensive. Now, when we talk about speech, oftentimes people say, well, wait a second. He wasn't saying anything. And I think many of you have alluded to this. Now, when you're talking about speech, it's not just what you say. Speech can be expression. Right? There's all kinds of things that we do every single day that are designed to express a message.
Well, there wasn't.
Right? All of those things. I can be at a game and doing this with my pal. Right? I'm expressing some sort of message. I'm communicating something. So here, I think, listen, as I look at Johnson, one of the most powerful ways that he could have communicated a message on that day was probably burning the flag. And I'm not advocating, I'm just saying he wanted to get people's attention. And I'm thinking of all the things he could have possibly done, because oftentimes that's what we'll hear. Well, he could have done this, and he could have done that. He could have. But who are you and I to decide how he communicates his message? Right? No, he just showed up as a protester and burned the flag. So, I think we want to be careful, and we want to be careful about going down this road of government. We let government decide whether or not the message is legitimate or not. And I understand the issue here, which is this whole idea of venerated object and the burning of the American flag. And the American flag is special, right? We pledged allegiance to it before we got started today. I understand that.
What if they were in the military?
Well, listen, is there not a code in place?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
You might be dealing with some different consequences there of a code that you've agreed to.
Yes.
But aside from that, you and I going about doing this, right? Remember when we're talking about the First Amendment, who are the players here? The player is government versus the individual. How are we going to allow this one to unfold? And I look at so many things that go on, and we're constantly getting government involved when we don't like what's happening. It's the reason why we have such big government. Well, I don't like the way he did that. I'm going to file a lawsuit.
There ought to be a law for that.
What's that?
There ought to be a law for that. Everybody says that.
Listen, at some point in the future, I'm going to talk about this. Bill Gates with Microsoft. Back in the day, Bill Gates took the position, I'm not interested in playing the game with the government. And yet the people started to watch what he was doing, believed that he was running a monopoly, and got government involved. Right? Are we happy about that? Now the government's involved? I just look at all of these things where we get mad, including social media. Think about Facebook, what's going on with Facebook and YouTube and all of these things. What do we do there? Do we like the way that they're censoring? No. So do we get government involved? I'm not interested. I am not interested in playing that game where because Zuckerberg is censoring a message that somehow we should get government involved so the playing field is more fair. Like, I'm just not interested. So, Facebook is not a government entity. They're not bound by the Constitution in the same regard that Congress would be. So I'm just not interested. Yet we hear this all the time. Get government involved to stop them from doing this, and this. How about we just go out and create another platform? Why don't we just do that? Because the other side, those that believe in bigger government and less liberty, have been playing this game so well for the last 100 years. They own the media, right? They own the educational system. And they're playing chess while we're playing checkers. And while they're out there playing chess, what are we trying to do to resolve the problems that we find problematic? Get government involved. Like, let's get the government all over Zuckerberg. I'm not willing to participate in that game. And I know there's a lot of conservatives out there saying, well, let's do it, man. They should have to. Well, they receive government money. Every single person in this room has received government money at some point. But are you now playing by the same standard when it goes about dealing with your neighbor? That no longer you can infringe on the speech of your neighbor? Like, the rules are not supposed to be the same. The way that you deal with another individual versus the way government deals with you and I. It's not that. Anyways, I wish I had more time, but it's just something to think about. I'd love to have more conversation after we're done because I know this really lights a fire for a lot of you. Like, Brian, you just make me mad. And I know some of you are mad. And I know some of you are mad, yes. Yep. That's right. That's such a great example. You know, the Let's Go Brandon, or do you remember when Obama back in the day, he says if they're going to bring, I don't remember the exact quote, and he says, man, if they're going to bring, if they're going to bring a knife, we bring a gun. Something like that. I was like, it's cool. Now everybody got all up in arms, man. He wants violence. That's called hyperbolic speech. Like he's creating this visual of, if they want to throw down, let's throw down. Like, did anybody really believe he was gonna, like, we're gonna go after these guys? Like you saw Trump do it all the time. Did we complain when he did it? No. Get government out of the way. Let people speak. Right? That's the idea. Let people be free, and let's use government as a last resort. Yes.
I was there at Holder.
Was it Holder?
Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta sit down because I'm the only one here. You guys are all up in arms, mad, some of you. But listen, these are not issues. I brought up that issue because it's not an easy issue. Right? It's one that kind of tugs at you emotionally, and being a constitutional advocate and being a very effective liberty advocate requires you to put emotion aside. It might require you to take some positions that maybe you don't agree with in your court. But remember, I've said this before. Being an effective liberty advocate is not about defending ideas that you believe in, just ideas you believe in. Being an effective liberty advocate is defending ideas that you may even find despicable. That's what this is about. Right? You might find Johnson's behavior despicable. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's not the way I would communicate the message. But that's the beauty of living in America, is we get to decide how we communicate the message as vital as it might be. Right? Let's get back to the America that the founders envisioned. That's where we need to go. Thank you guys. With that, let's do this. Get back up here.